Hey everyone, we're just getting started. I want to welcome you all to the session today. If you're here, what I would like for you to do is just say hi to me over in the comments. Shruti and I are here with you, excited to give you some insights. Craig, good to see you, man. Good to have you here. Who else? We have some more folks. More folks are coming in right now. Chuck, good to see you. Philippe, Margie, good to see you. Aaron, good to see you. Says more folks are coming in. What I would like for you all to do, we're going to do something cool today. We believe in the idea of individuals connecting, like actual friends, and you're not just here as a fly on the wall. So we'll do something with that in 1 second. But what I want for you to do right now, just to kind of test out the chat feature, because we're going to do some things here. I want you to tell us what city you're hailing from, where you're calling from, what city you're at. Just go ahead and put it in the comments. All right, so we got Philadelphia. Cool. We got Ontario. Hey, Phil, good to see you. Good to have you here. All right, we got Omaha, originally out of Pittsburgh. Okay. Well, you know what, Craig, those places are both cold right now for me. I'm in South Florida. We got John with Cleveland. I'm in West Palm Beach. We got Warsaw. Sweet. So you guys are getting the hang of this. Omaha's pretty warm right now. Oh, it's warm in Omaha. All right. Well, good. John's out of Tampa. Just this week is warm. Oh, great. John, good to see you. It was just down in Tampa. Great weather. Yes, it is. Come back and visit next time, John. Let me know when you're here. Get a chance to hang out and party. Snow flurries up in Canada. But John, seriously, I have a friend right now. He's in town, and we're doing some social distancing get together on Friday. So we're gonna go and have dinner or have lunch. So I like to have connection with folks. So if you're here, feel free to connect with me. All right, cool. Now the other thing I want you to do, as more people are coming in, I would like for you to go ahead and get your LinkedIn profile. If you don't know how to get your LinkedIn profile, just go to your LinkedIn, get your name, and click on yourself, get your profile link, and put it in here. If you desire to share, because I feel when I go to online events, one of the best benefits is the interaction. Most webinars is just kind of like boring. You're actually, the person is talking, and then you don't get a chance to really interact. But I don't like those. So I say whenever I do webinars, I want to have interaction. So if you're here, I want to actually build connection with you. And if you want to connect with some other people here who could potentially be customers, or maybe they know somebody that could benefit from the product or service that you have, just get your LinkedIn profile link and go ahead and toss it into the chat area and start connecting with folks and be friends, man. We're all in sales. We all want to improve. So those who are just coming in here today, so far, we're going to get started in the next minute. What I would like for you to do is just get your LinkedIn profile and put it into the comments. We get a chance to connect with fellow folks who are coming in. We see a bunch of folks. So we're going to go ahead and get started here. Shruti, ready to party like a rock star?
Absolutely. And I'm going to put my own LinkedIn profile in the comments as well to keep the party going.
Awesome. So welcome everyone to this webinar. We're going to have our goal here is to have a really, really good time with you. We want to give you some data, some information. You're going to hear a lot about our friends over at Wingman. Today we're going to talk about Shruti in just 1 second. But one of the things that I want you all to know as well is that at the very end, if you stick around, we have 2 Amazon gift cards that we're giving away. It's $25 Amazon gift card, and you'll get sent to you. But you have to stick around, and we're going to pull from the attendees that are here, 2 of you, and give you those and give you an opportunity to win that. So I mean, worst case scenario, you get go use it on a Black Friday deal or something. But we just a little piece that we want to give you as well. And then also another thing that we want you to be aware of as well, if you're just logging in and you didn't do it already, we want you to make sure you connect with other folks. So go ahead and share your LinkedIn profile, and each of you go ahead and connect with individuals' LinkedIn and chat. Use the comments. We're going to do some polls as well, and that's the reason why I want to see if you all are using the chat area well, because we're going to use some polls. Shruti and I, we said we didn't want to make this like a boring old webinar where it's just one person talking or where it's no interaction. So we're going to have several polls that we want to get your feedback on, and we're going to ask some questions, and we're going to have some color commentates. Shruti has some amazing content. Like, I mean, you saw some of the posting, you saw some of the things that we were sharing. This stuff is like gold, and I'm a big fan of Wingman, not because they sponsor our podcast, but because they really have good information. I thought it would be great for our community to learn from what they're offering. A lot of this event is a lot of the content here we're going to gear towards sales kickoff. The beauty of this information is that whether you're a sales leader or a sales rep or a business owner, you could benefit from this content, you could benefit from this information, and you could apply it to your business as well. And one of the other things that I'm going to ask you too, if you don't mind, is if you want to tell other people about this, you can go ahead and take that link that you got. Yes, this is being recorded, Mark. You can take that link and go ahead and share it right now on Twitter and social media. It will double your chances of getting name picked. So your name will be double your chances there. So if you want to take that link for this event and go ahead and share it on LinkedIn or share it on Twitter and tag me, Donald C. Kelly, and Wingman, it will double your chances of having your name in the hat to be picked. So with that, now let's just go ahead and dive into this webinar. The reason why you're here today, three ways we can use data to enhance our sales kickoff and help us out. And we're going to share with you some ideas here that can help you. I want to introduce Shruti. Shruti Kapoor she's the chief wing woman at Wingman, and also the CEO and founder. She holds the fort down at Wingman, and Wingman, if you haven't checked it out, it's a powerful tool. We use it in the sense of, I can't sit around and coach my sales reps every single time, but with Wingman, it's able to listen to the AI, is able to listen to the conversation of my sellers, and it's able to give feedback or give them prompts if somebody is maybe they're talking a little bit too much. We want them to talk 60% of the time, and the client talk 40%. It gives them a nudge about that. It also is able to give them prompts, and if they could comment objection, if somebody's asking about price, it could pop up on the screen. So it's an aid when I'm not around to help our sellers, and it has tons of really cool data that they've been able to collect. Wingman has served hundreds of clients throughout the world, and they've collected from over 1 million sales calls through the AI, a lot of information, stuff that you're going to learn today on this call. So Shruti has prepared a bunch of this information. She's going to dive in and introduce herself a little bit more, and then dive into the presentation, and we'll get a chance to interact. So again, for those who are just jumping on, go ahead and take your LinkedIn link and share it in the comments, and then we'll go ahead and get started from there. But anyways, Shruti, I'll throw it over to you. Welcome to
Absolutely.
the show. I feel like it's a podcast. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. And, we do have a ton of exciting insights. I can't wait to get started. Thanks so much for having me. And, let's keep this interactive. Keep your questions coming in. And Donald, do keep an eye on the questions on my behalf so we can take them as they come. We all know this has been a pretty tough year, and beyond the fact that we are all stuck at home, for a lot of us stuck at home with our kids, which can cut both ways. There's been a lot of change, but what has made it even more challenging for salespeople is that it's been harder for a lot of people to, be able to do cold calls. The phone number data is limited for a lot of industries. There's been a lot of also, kind of hate on social media for people doing prospecting there. And, competition has, not relented. So, it's kind of people being hit on all sides.
Real quick, some people, the screen isn't showing. Do you mind stop sharing and then share again? See if it pops up.
Oh, okay.
There we go. Let's try it one more time. All right, sorry about that, gang. It should pop up now. You should see it in a second when we reshare our screen. But you'll be able to see the information. And while
Is the screen visible now?
there we go. Yep, there we are. I can see it now.
Oh.
So if you, yep, everyone can see it.
Okay.
Great.
Perfect. Yeah, so I think what we really want to do today is to figure out a few actionable things that we could be doing to make our sales kickoff in 2021 much better. So, we've divided this into looking at 3 ways in which people can look at data and use that to design a much better program for the next year, right? So one of the things that sales leaders often talk about is that they have playbooks, right? They have these best practices that they've identified, and now they want to see whether those are working, right? But before we can even see whether or not our best practices are working, what is important is to know whether your reps are even adopting those best practices, right? Or so-called best practices. So that's the first part of what we're going to look at. And then the second way in which I think people should look at their data is to look at, what is happening in the calls that they are winning and in the deals that they're losing, and to try to find trends there. And we will be doing that across the big data set that we looked at of 2 million or so sales minutes, call minutes. But, I think what really matters is for people to go back and try and look at some of this for their own data. And then the third piece, I believe, which is super important, is to look at how the reps in your own organizations that are doing well are doing things differently from the other reps, right? And the reason for that is because, that is the most contextual benchmark that you can get, right? And we'll kind of talk about that later as well. So this is the data we crunched, nearly 250,000 calls, 2 million minutes of calls. And this is all pretty recent data, as of end of October. So the first thing we wanted to look at was playbooks, right? And there are different things that people put in their playbooks. Of course, it could be something as simple as having qualification questions to something like, this is how I want you to set up next steps or set up agenda for a call, right? So let's maybe look at this. And so the first thing we wanted to see was, that's how you're supposed to start the call, by setting the agenda. Now, Donald, before this webinar, we were kind of talking about this, right? Like, how often do you think people do this, right? We hear this so, repeated everywhere. So we have a poll. We'd love to hear from all of you on whether people, how often do people set up agenda? It seems like a no-brainer. It seems easy, but are people doing it?
So we see some answers coming in so far. What percentage of sales of calls are sellers actually using agenda? So far, we hear that 29%. We see that 29% of people say 29% of them is winning. We have, and that's 67% of you all responded to that. 25% of you said 7%. 8% of you said 42% of the time. So the question is, one more time, if you see the poll pop up there, just go ahead and do the poll. What percentage of calls are sellers actually using agenda? And I think right now is probably looking at numbers, we're seeing it leveling out at people saying, Shruti, that 29% of the time, 29.3% of the time, sellers are actually using agenda on the calls. And I think it was a red herring. I threw that one in there that got him. So you want to give him the real answer?
Absolutely. I think we had a few extra digits there. So this is absolutely a shocker.
Yeah.
I hope you're not using the answers to this poll as a way to decide on your Amazon gift cards.
Yeah.
So yeah, this really got us, right? And Why this got me was I understand sales calls are a high stress situation. People are not always able to follow through on what they think is the best practice. But the thing with agenda is one, it's pretty simple, it's non-threatening, and it happens right up front in a call typically, which means that you have much more control over being able to talk about it. But yeah, surprisingly, people are not talking about it. And later on, when we look at win-loss kind of numbers, we'll see how this impacts, actual sales outcomes. But Donald, any quick thoughts on why maybe reps don't set up agenda as often as they should be?
I know exactly one of those things. It's because, and so Andres asked, he was like, that's low. And you're right. I mean, think about this is over all these millions, a 250,000 of calls that we were able to analyze with Wingman. And we're to see this, collect the data from that. On those calls, only 4% of those salespeople actually use an agenda at the beginning of the call. And I think what happens is because we get lazy. I'm just going to be straight up. It's like, if everybody did what they knew they were supposed to do, I think we would all be like freaking rich, amazing looking billionaires, but we don't. How many of us actually do some of those things? How many of us work out every morning on cue that we're supposed to? How many of us eat right? I can tell you last night, I didn't eat right because I went home. My wife was like, we want pizza. So we got pizza, right? So that's one of the challenges that we're seeing, that we just don't do everything that we're supposed to. So even though we need to make sure, even though we should as sellers set the agenda, it takes time. And it's very simple. What I recommend folks to do to help with that is that in the calendar invite, when you're setting up a call with a prospect, just give a basic agenda in that calendar invite. And especially since many of us are using Zoom, but then now when you actually jump on the call, and the reason why agenda works, it keeps you on track to hit the things that matter the most. So now if I have this agenda before the call, I can say, Shruti, we're going to go over these things today. We're going to go over this. We're going to go over this. Is there anything else you would like to add? Yeah, I want to learn about your pricing. I want to learn about this. Great. Anything else? No. Now that I have what you want, I am dedicating this meeting towards you, and that makes a difference. But again, most sellers, and I'm going to be straight up, because even this afternoon before this one, I had another meeting that I was coming to, a virtual event that I was speaking at. I'm traveling all over the world today with my virtual events, but I was speaking at this event, and then I had a sales call right after that. Did I have my agenda? I did not. And I know that I'm supposed to do that. So I missed it on that one. Am I hoping that that deal continues to go forward? Yes, and it looks like it is. And I think sometimes we find that our deals, we get lucky, I want to say, and our deals go without agenda. So then we think, oh, we don't need the agenda all the time. But you should have that. So
yeah, and I think it's a great practice for two reasons. One is it helps you sound organized and in control, right? And very often today, when buyers are coming in, they want to be speaking to people who they think of more as experts rather than as sellers, right? Because they can do a bunch of research before they come in, right? So I think that kind of gives you a little bit of the edge. And you're right. The second thing is really it helps sales, the buyer kind of put in what they have in mind and what they want resolved before that call ends. So I think that kind of just helps make sure that if they had one burning question that they wanted answered and it didn't, then maybe they don't show up for the next call. So yeah. The other thing that we hear very often is to lead with problems rather than with solutions, right? For two reasons. One is it makes it a more open conversation. It makes sure that you understand what is really important to your buyer. Because when you go into the solution part of it, you're really focusing on what's important to you, which is your product or your offering. And here again, because of all of these reasons, it sounds like a no-brainer, but boom, the numbers were even more disappointing. So this one actually is, in some sense, even more baffling for me because it seems like the obvious way to start a conversation. Any tips, Donald, that you'd like to share on how you like to kind of focus on the problems, or how you train people to focus on the problems versus leading with the solution?
Yeah, I just had a call with someone about this, and we did a podcast episode actually with this gentleman. His name is Sean, and one of the things Sean was talking about was so often we look forward. Everybody likes to look at the features and the benefits or the opportunities. So let's say I sell TVs, right? It is so nice to then start talking about the benefits of this TV. Like the TV is big, it's 4K, it's 5K. You can see the dirt on top of the dirt. It's that clear. It's like, we always talk about all those things, but we don't talk about the current circumstances. And so what we want to do is we want to focus on the problem. And what I teach my clients is to ask questions about those problems in the scenario. So let's say, well, why in the world, let's say it's talking to, Andres, so tell me what brought you in today for looking for a TV? Instead of going into, well, this is an awesome 4K, Andres is going to tell me the problem. He's like, yeah, I want to get something better to watch games. Don't jump in at that point and go talk about your features and benefit. What you need to do then say, interesting. Tell me, how often do you watch football games? I mean, I watch football games all the time in all kinds of sports. All right, and what's wrong with your current TV right now? Why is it not working? Andres said his son broke the TV. So he's not, why is it not working? His son broke it. Now, how is that impacting your social life? You want to go a little bit deeper with the problem that he's having right now. And then once you can do that, then you can then go forward. So if you were to fix that, what would that bring? How would that help your current situation? And you want to guide them. I was in a training earlier this morning as well, and we were talking about the similar thing. Focus on the problem before you and don't just jump and go straight to the solution. Focus on the problem. People make decisions emotionally. They justify it logically. After they've understood the problem, they understood the reason for the change, then you want to go into talking about what are some of those results or outcome from it, the solution.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, as we see the win rates and how any of these things impact those win rates, I think it'll become a lot stronger, the argument that we are making here. But yeah, I would love to hear from people also on how they do some of these things, right? Like how do they actually use this problem-based selling approach or any challenges that they've faced. The other piece that we looked at was, always be closing. And when I say always be closing, we are looking at calls, especially where people talked about, some sort of a commitment, right? Like whether looking for, a contract or a POC or something like that. And, you have to remember, this is across all types of calls in the system, of course, excluding really short calls or calls that don't connect in cold calls. And what we see is here, actually, the reps are not doing too badly, right? So in, more than a fifth of the calls, people are talking about some sort of closing-based signals, which I think is a good sign. Of course, as long as you're doing it in the right tone and at the right moment, so that it's not coming across as pushy. Yeah, this is, somewhat disappointing. And for a couple of reasons, right? So one is, I think customer stories are super important for building trust and showing value. And so on the building trust part, there isn't something that can do this better than, maybe bringing your customer on the call itself. It's in some sense surprising that people are not doing this enough. And in some ways, I can also understand why people don't do it, because I think people are not trained for storytelling. And a lot of the customer case studies that are on the website are just, like cut and dry. They don't really flow into a story that they can actually use as a conversation. Any experiences here that you'd like to share, Donald?
Yeah, I mean, the customer story is, remember, we are going to, so what is this saying that right now, you want to hear what's happening with Jana's salespeople emerge. So in the comments, but one of the things that we're saying from this is that 1.3% of all calls are sellers actually using those customer story, and what they're doing, the problem that's happening here, I could bet, is that most people are focusing on, again, the features and the benefits, or focusing on, just trying to get something across. And maybe in the COVID era, we see that maybe people are just desperate. But we got to recognize that story, people want to build the trust. And what I try to do is each point of my sales process, I try to make sure that I have some kind of story tied back to that. What are some of the common problems that I face, that people come up with? This might be, well, the price is too high, or I don't have the time right now. I might say, something like, John, I totally understand where you're coming from. One of our clients, XYZ, was in a similar situation. Their team was not, they didn't have enough time they felt like they didn't have enough time to do prospecting because they were doing all these other things. But what they were able to do as a result was we were able to do this. And then as a result of that, this was able to happen. But I focus on the pain, what was happening for the client. My client was in this situation. They had this problem. So they're making it relatable. And then here's the result. That wasn't a long story, but it was a story. And you have tons of story. Everybody has all kinds of stories from your clients. It's just a matter of you writing them down and just putting them. For each of those common objections, put a simple little story, put a client success, and then use that in it. When I hear people say sometimes, like they tell me, well, it's too expensive right now. Somebody might say, well, it's too expensive. You're like, I totally understand where you're coming from. Please tell me a little bit more. What do you mean by that? They go into a little bit more explaining why it's so expensive. You say, I understand where you're coming from, Jana. One of my clients, ABC company, they said the same exact thing before they came on with us. But as a result, after they came with us, and they were recognizing that their team weren't spending time doing this and blah, 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 they saw the result, we were able to help them. If we could do similar things for you and for your team, would you be at least open to moving forward or for a demonstration? Sure.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
I think the ability to weave the story at the right time is super important. Where I've seen people even use kind of customer names, very often people just name drop, and I think that totally doesn't have the impact that you can with a story well told.
Yeah, and I think it's just like you name drop, and anybody could just name drop, but name drop, like you're saying, name drop with a point or with reasons. Yeah, with some emotions. That's where magic happens.
That's really powerful. With the before and after state.
Yeah.
And then I think, Donald, you wanted to see whether people would fare better on guessing how often are reps actually asking qualification questions.
Yeah, so we have a poll on this one. So on what percentage of calls do you feel sellers are asking qualification questions? So you should see the poll pop up right now. What percentage of calls do you feel that sales reps are asking qualification questions? On 10% of the calls, on 27% of the calls, 65% of the calls, 83% of the calls. What percentage of calls do you feel sellers are asking qualification questions? All right, so we got a lot of answers coming in. We have a tie between 10% and 27%. We have 65%, only 7% of people said that, and 83% only 7%. So you want to reveal the answer?
Sure, and just to clarify, right, like qualification questions here is we've considered basically band range of qualification questions, budget, authority, need, and timeline. I think people have smartened up to our tricks, and it is 10%. Honestly, given that this is a mixed set of calls, right? This is not just discovery calls or qualification calls or demo calls. I don't think 10% is super bad, right? I think maybe around 25-30% would have been better. I do feel that there is a strong hesitation that people face with asking too many qualification questions because they feel that it begins to sound like an interrogation. And I think it's fair. How do you draw the balance on this one, Donald?
Yeah, I think it's because, again, we as seller, John said, dang, Donald, these numbers are really kind of sad. And you're right. It is sad. And this goes back to, again, why we feel that salespeople should be educated. Because it's what happens is that we get into bad habits. We get into situations, and I did this, Shruti. I went into a company where I was a junior seller. I followed all the training. I did everything that I was supposed to, and I saw a hockey stick performance. But then I got comfortable at a level, and I was like, I can just chill. I don't need to do this stuff every day. I don't need to do the agenda. I didn't ask about the numbers. I kind of feel that already. I kind of understand. I can guess. It seems like they're interested, and we miss it. And this data is not lying, because it's really what it's doing. It's an AI, so it's able to pull from that conversation what people are actually saying. So it's not like going on the feeling. This is actual, real, legit stuff, what you're actually saying on your call, and this is why you can't make it up. So I think sellers oftentimes in their sales processes, it's just that they get comfortable. They get to the point where they just feel like, I know this, or I assume. And the assumption, John says, the comfort leads to death, and a comfort leads to that assumption, and that assumption will kill you quick. Assumption is like poison. You never, ever want to assume. So I like to write down on a piece of paper. I have my notebook, but I'll write down the BANT stuff, right? You want to ask the budget. I want to get some of these information so I can put it into my CRM, or have my VA put it in a CRM. But I have those so that I can write them and I can know what it is, or even do a simple check mark. But that way, that helps me. But I think that's what happens especially with the clients that I coach.
Yeah, and I think just from a sales kickoff perspective, right? Like, a lot of people have a playbook, and the playbook defines that you should be asking banned questions, right? But I think what is important is to get into the weeds and define what is a non-threatening way of asking a budget question. Because I think the reason why these questions are not getting asked is, one, reps don't want it to sound like an interrogation, which means that if you could make it sound more interesting, weave that into a more natural flow of the conversation, people would do that more often. And I think maybe enough people don't spend the time and effort to do it, or enough sales managers think that, if I were to define this out more, I'm taking away, the creative license of my salesperson. But I think that it's important to kind of give some of those good examples of asking a qualification question.
Yeah, and I think you're right there. It's like the role playing with it. Nothing will come just from osmosis. We get the opportunity, and we should take advantage of the opportunity to practice it. Andres just went through one of our training programs, and one of the things that we talked about was changing the mindset, but also the idea of practice. How can we practice what we're doing so that it becomes second nature? And then if you're practicing it, you can change it up. John just gave a question, a good statement here. He said, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, I'm guessing there's budget allocated for this. How do you put that together? Or how do you put that together? In just a natural way of how John asked that question. But if somebody's talking to you, of course, they're going to know that you're going to pay for, they're going to have to pay for something. They're not going to come to your software company and think it's for free, right? So unless maybe they're that naive, but yeah. So we shouldn't be afraid of asking. And usually what happens, Shruti, I think, is because what we're sharing here is that it's usually in the mind of the seller, and it's not in the mind of the buyer. So we assume the buyer might be upset if we ask about budget. Of course they're not going to be. They know it's going to cost something. It's just us. We need to get over our high horses and our own mental block.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we kind of dug a little bit deeper, and we see this is the qualification questions related to timeline, which are happening in maybe half of those overall qualification question calls, and these are the qualification questions related to budget. I didn't even put the ones around authority and need because the percentages are so small.
Yeah, that's sad too. That's
yeah. So I think overall takeaway is, when people are designing their playbooks, it's important for them to also think about how to get those playbooks adopted, right? And like in the case of qualification questions, I think an important blocker to getting them adopted by sales reps is not having a good, non-threatening conversational way of asking that question. And I think, when you're designing your 2021 playbook or script, go back and, get into the weeds, do that. And I think the second part of the reason why people don't know whether the playbooks are working is they don't know whether they're being adopted or whether they're having an impact. So yeah, let's look at the impact piece of it. Of course, every data has a caveat. Your context might be different, your industry might be different. So some of these stats will not apply to you. It's always best to go back and look at your own data and see what trends you see there. So yeah, earlier we talked about how people were not setting agenda. It was only happening in 4% of the calls, but this is the impact that just something as simple as setting agenda can have on your win rates, right? It will more than double your win rates. And this was just absolutely mind-boggling.
120%. So this is, again, guys, listen to this. If you use agenda will help to increase your win rate by 120%. 120% increase that win rate. You can see the data there. This is across all deals. Love that. Use that agenda. I mean, don't go shy. Use that agenda.
Yeah, and I think as a sales manager, what is important is if somebody basically came and told me, like if somebody gave me advice without data, I would say, that's your opinion. But if somebody came and told me, listen, agenda is going to double your win rate, I'm going to be like, heck, I'm going to use it, right? So I think that's kind of the other takeaway, right? Like if more people, I think if all the reps whose calls we analyzed knew that agenda is going to have such a big impact, that number won't be 4%. So the good news, of course, is that it looks like this year people are beginning to use agenda a little bit more than they were last year, but we'll see whether that sticks around. We looked at problem-based selling early on, right? And again, we would have thought that it is important, but I was surprised to see how important it is and how much impact it has on improving win rates. Right, 70% is pretty mind-boggling.
Yeah. So if you're doing, the tip for you all and sales leaders on the call and watching this recording, if your sellers are not focusing on the problem, I mean, I guess how do you figure this out? You can record all of their calls and you can go back and listen to it. But you use a tool like a Wingman, it's able to identify if they're focusing on problem-based things. And then that way you don't have to listen to 100 sales calls, but it takes advantage of it for you. But that's one of the strategies. The reasons I like it is that you're able to see what's working or what's not working for your team. But there you go, 70% increase in win rate.
Yeah, it's it definitely seems like something that people should be doing much more. So of course, the closing signals piece. Now, there's part of this data that looks really interesting, which is it is increasing your win rate by 70%. But you have to remember the baseline is only around 5.5%, right? Which means that even in all of the calls where people are talking about closing signals, maybe roughly around 10% of them are actually closing, right, to a win. So I think it's important for sales reps to also be cautious and not get excited. That just because we spoke about contract and a POC, I think this, the closing chance is 70% or whatever. Right? It's good to be putting in those closing signals, but don't interpret them as a done deal.
John says those happy ears. And I can tell you, I've had those happy ears before where I'm like, yeah, I hear what I want to hear, what the buyer is saying. I'm like, okay, well, that's cool. Let's go ahead and get the proposal to you. But I didn't get all the details. And the deal didn't work out. But hey, You learn hard. You learn the mistake. You shouldn't make those mistakes over and over again.
And yeah, ideally, you can learn from other people's mistakes, so you don't have to make all of your own.
John says one that he gets is, I like what I see. I like what I see. And all of a sudden, the sales rep thinks, oh, yeah. Great. So what does that mean when you send it to you?
Absolutely. And I think we wanted to hear, we've looked at some of the win-loss impact of best practices. We wanted to hear what people think would be the impact of customer stories on win rates.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They got a poll here. So this is a final poll. So how do customer stories impact your win rate? So here's what do you guys think? Do you think customer stories impact your win rate in a good way, bad way? Do you think it increases by 77%, 23%, 76%, 51%? What do you think? Using customer stories, how does that impact your win rate? All right, so we got right now 58% of people said by 76%. Using customer stories will impact your win rate by 51%. 38% of you said that. 13% of you said by 23%. So let's see what the answer is. How does customer stories impact win rate? 51.
Yes, it's a modest 51%, given some of the other stats that we saw. But yeah, I would absolutely still say that it's important to coach your team on telling the right customer stories the right way. And yeah, maybe if, as you're planning the agenda for your sales kickoff, maybe one thing that you want to add to it is, bringing the voice of your customer into that, right? Whether that is by playing a recording of what they do, or if possible, actually having them live on your sales kickoff and getting them to interact with your sales team.
Awesome. Love it. Love it.
Yeah, and this was another surprising one. So the qualification questions actually have a pretty significant positive impact on win rates. So yeah, for all of those people out there who are a bit shy to ask qualification questions, jump right into it. And again, we split that out into qualification questions around timeline and around budget, and both of them have pretty strong improvement. I would say budget questions actually have an even stronger improvement on the win rate, but also they, in some sense, increase the loss rate, which means that you get to a decision faster, right? And that's very important in sales because you want to be spending time on the right deals. And I think asking the budget qualification question means that you preempt some of the blockers that might come up later. You are able to have a better plan for bringing that deal home. Yeah. Any thoughts there, Donald? Anything that you'd like to add?
Yeah. So and this is part what we go back to a little bit earlier. I think what typically happens with salespeople is that the sales individuals, like, they're the ones who get all awkward, so they don't ask those questions, right? But when it's clearly you could see, like, if you ask the right budget questions, it's almost 80% increase your win rate by 80%, because now I feel what happens, you weed out the people who are not going to make a decision or who can't do it right now. And it's like somebody said it earlier in the comments, is that you're confident, right? You build a super strong confidence, and people, I think it was John, like right now more than ever, people can't necessarily see you, but if they can feel or hear that confidence in your voice, then it's like, okay, well, Donald's price is more expensive than the other vendor, but I feel confident with them, so I'm going to go with them. But you there's something about it. If you're just being timid, well, do you think that this is something you could afford? Like, come on, man. No, let's be big girls and big boys. Ask the question.
Yeah. And I think that what happens is that once you've put the qualification question on budget, you'll also automatically, in some sense, have a discussion around price. And then that gives everyone on the deal team a way to think about the ROI, the utility of the product in terms of what they're going to pay for it, and so they get prepped for that spend early on, and yeah, I think that helps.
Yeah.
The other interesting one was competitors. People are often worried that if a competitor shows up, that means that they're going to lose the deal. But in fact, your win rates are actually higher for calls where competitors were mentioned.
Interesting.
My guess is, typically if people are more serious in the buying phase, they will be looking at more than one solution, right? And so if somebody is bringing up a competitor, that means that maybe they are a little bit more advanced in their decision that they do need to buy something. And that's a good sign for you.
John used a great line. He said, I'm sure you guys are looking at, I'm sure you guys are doing your due diligence. Who else are you looking at? And I think if you're working with a potential prospect that is, that is someone that is really, like you said, really interested, they're gonna tell you, they're gonna say, yeah, Donald, we're looking at ABC company and XYZ as well. And what I typically say at that point, I'm like, sometimes customers will say, well, what separate you from XYZ? And John points out, you don't want to say anything bad about them, right? You don't want to go and badmouth your competition. I don't do that. But what I would say, and when I did software sales and we did have a common competitor come up, I would say, praise what they did well. Be like, XY Laserfish, that's what it was. They are amazing with the clerks. They do a great job with that. However, the reason why most of our clients who were Laserfish client came with us was because of X, Y, and Z. And that way I'm saying that they do something great, but this is what my clients are saying. So I'm not even saying anything bad. The reason why my clients came was because of this X, Y. So anyways.
Yeah, no, that's good advice. And I think if you don't bring up that conversation and if you're not upfront about it, what happens is that your competition instead gets to define that narrative, right? They get to say the light of saying, we do this better. And yeah, you'd much rather control that narrative.
Yeah.
And so, of course, competition or mention of competitors is often considered an objection, right? So let's look at some of the other objections. And I know we're kind of running out of time, so maybe we'll breeze through this a little bit. Sure. So one is customers bringing on objections on sales calls happens pretty often, right? It happens in 1 out of every 3 calls. And the good news there is that when an objection is mentioned, your chances of winning the deal, are not negatively impacted, right? In fact, they go up. And so I think the takeaway from a sales kickoff and planning perspective is to make sure that you use the objection more as an opportunity to be able to dive deeper and earn the trust of your customer rather than as a way or look at it as something that needs to be dealt with, right? And we've seen this consistently across different segments that mention of an objection actually correlates to higher win rates, right? So I think the good news for reps is if you hear an objection, embrace that, and that's probably going to be the deal that has a higher chance of closing. So don't give up on that, and don't treat that as something negative. So in roughly a quarter of the calls, the objection that people bring up is timing. And honestly, with COVID, this baseline might be a bit higher. But timing is definitely an important one. Of course, the good thing from a buyer's perspective with timing is that it's also very non-threatening. It's easier for them to say, hey, this is not a good time, or we'll look at it next quarter. When the real objection might actually be budget related or something else, right? So it's important to make sure that you also don't take the objection at face value. People I think use timing sometimes as just an easy excuse and an easy out.
Totally agree with that one. Yeah.
Surprisingly, budget actually comes up as an objection in much fewer calls. And I think it's not because it's not an objection, but like I said, I think it's just because people are more comfortable hiding behind timing versus hiding behind budget. Yeah, and then where budget is mentioned as an objection, it does also increase your loss rate significantly. So I think if that happens, then you the good news is you will get to a decision faster, but the bad news is that very often that decision will be negative.
Yeah.
So, let's kind of get into the third section. I know we've kind of dealt with a lot of numbers, so we won't be dealing with any more numbers in the section. But really, earlier this year, somebody asked me, hey, is it a good idea to talk about COVID on sales calls, right? And I was thinking whether we should go back and look at data, but then I realized that there are certain things which are very context specific. Now, if you were in an industry which was, in some sense benefiting from COVID, talking about COVID is not a bad idea on a sales call, right? So an example would be like if you're in insurance related sales, right? Or if you are in some sort of cloud infrastructure sale, right? You want to play on that emotion that COVID brings out in people of fear, of uncertainty, and stuff. But if you were on the other hand, say in a luxury goods space, right? Like you definitely don't want to be talking about COVID. So I think that's why it's important to look at these benchmarks in context. Right? You don't want to blindly say that it's good to do this or it's bad to do this. And I think the best way to look at these things in context is by looking at your own reps and comparing how, what your good reps are doing differently from your reps who are not doing so well. Of course, if you don't already have a way to analyze your calls to do this, you could even maybe get someone to manually start looking at some metrics for you, right? Maybe give them, maybe 20, 30 calls of each rep and ask them to see whether these things are happening, right? But of course, if you have a tool, if you have the ability to just have all of the calls analyzed, you will get much better data. So, I think some of the metrics that are important, and I'll just talk through those. One is, the talk to listen ratio. And again, while we've seen overall, when we look at the data set, the talk to listen ratio isn't super conclusive for win rates, but I think it's still important as a metric within the team to see whether your reps are actually having the right type of engaging conversations, right? You, of course, also want to be able to look at their overall productivity, so total calls, number of minutes of calls. And then the other one that people often talk about is the ability to ask open-ended questions. If you think that qualification questions were hard, then asking open-ended questions is, I think, at least 5 times harder, right? So it's important to look at whether the reps are doing that. Again, in some cases, you might see that there isn't a difference whether people are asking engaging questions or not in terms of their final outcomes, but it really depends on the stage of the deal, on your sales cycle, how important each of these things are. So yeah, I think as you think about your sales kickoff and plan for writing up that playbook, finding the right tone that you want to hit with the team for the next year, make sure that you have some of this data so that when you're trying to get people to make a change to their sales habits, you are able to back that up with data and you're able to show them success with the new playbooks. Yeah, and you of course want to be doing this analysis and this feedback and coaching constantly. It can't be a once in a year thing. It's a little bit like you have to brush your teeth. You can go to the dentist once in 6 months, but you do have to brush your teeth every day to keep food hygiene. And that's just super, super important when it comes to sales best practices as well. Yeah, that brings me to the end of this. Happy to switch over and take questions, talk a little bit more about how people are thinking about their sales kickoffs, and anything else.
So yeah, want to answer what questions you all have. Any questions at all about any of the data, about sales kickoff, about how this could be useful to help your team, help with your playbook, help with some strategies for 2021. Marissa, 2020 is our first year. We're beginning to get some traction, so that's great. Donald, business has both increase and decrease, if that makes sense. Any questions you all have regarding any of the data that Shruti shared today, or anything that we need to go a little bit further insight in, or any other clarification that you all might have about sales kickoff in general? There are a lot of engagements, not tons of questions. All right. Mike said, I'd love to see any studies or resource that you have, let me see, regarding these numbers. So I think you guys have some stuff that you hand out, or some information, right, Shruti, or is there a way they can get some more of this data?
Yeah, sure. We will be actually putting together, more content, not just around the data, but also how do you take the data into actionables, right? And yeah, we'll definitely share that with the group.
Okay, awesome. Andres says very
and I think
clear.
We'll be sharing the recording as well, Donald.
Yes, we'll definitely get that, get you guys a recording.
Sure.
Philippe said, where can I get access to these reports?
Yeah, I can share the link to our blog where we post a lot of this regularly.
Okay, great. Janice says, I'm still waiting for my sales rep to respond about the agenda question. I'll get to the bottom of this. Phil says, are these numbers as relevant on cold calls as they are on second or third contacts? Shruti, thoughts on that?
Yeah, so we actually, churned out a bunch of data, especially for cold calls. And then for cold calls, we also defined success a little bit differently. We didn't look at final win rates. We looked at whether or not that deal progressed at all, right? And what we see is that a lot of the trends are similar, right? But of course, you will look at, say, agenda setting differently, right? That'll be more the upfront contract of taking permission for, can I take a minute of your time or whatever. So yeah, it is definitely relevant from what we saw. We didn't see any contradictions, but happy to connect offline and share some of the insights from the cold call data specifically.
Love it. All right. And let me see, there's another comment that just came in. Let me see what another question came in. Do you recommend a presentation early in conversations?
Yeah. So, I think today it's important to kind of build rapport with being as face-to-face as you can be in a virtual world. So I think going into a slide share and making yourself a small thumbnail is not ideal. I think it's important early on when you need to ask questions, if possible, to spend at least the first 5 to 7 minutes just not having any visual aids, and then maybe switching helps. But yeah, that's actually an interesting piece of data for us to look at, which is, does having longer slide shares and screen shares, impact close rates? We'll get to that as well, Marjorie.
Love it. All right, then we have switching. So Janice says, are you able to decipher which social media outlets has been most effective for sales? Just curious. Though I'm not the lead on sales in my team, I have generated a wealth of information here. So Jana is an influencer. She could take this back to her team lead, but she's asking which platform. Any thoughts on that?
I think that will really depend on the audience, right? Like more creative audience, maybe on a platform like Instagram versus a more sales-oriented or business-oriented audience on a platform like LinkedIn. And honestly, we've seen even Reddit being a good resource. And we've actually been getting a bunch of leads where people are like, "Oh, we heard about you on Reddit," and I'm like, do you usually use Reddit to do your research? And people are like, "Yeah, we seem to get more honest opinions there." So yeah, I think it really varies depending on who you're selling to. And I think the only way to discover that, as with anything else around marketing, is to experiment and see, if you were to spend the same amount of time on each of those channels, what's getting you the most bang for the buck.
Love it. All right. Couple more questions. Any other questions that you all have? The startup studio I advise uses Reddit to find startups. Yep. Reddit is an amazing platform. If any of you don't take advantage of Reddit, you should do so. Craig said, what about switching off your screen when talking for a long period of time? Just a hunch. And I think that goes right along those lines. If you're going to talk for a while with your screen on, especially the early conversations, yeah, you probably want to be seen. So go ahead and pull that.
Yeah. But, I think going back on that question around, should you use slides? What I've seen is, especially when reps are starting out, slides can be a great resource for them to kind of use also to do the discovery and ask the questions, because you can kind of queue it up on the slides and say, hey, can I take a pause here and ask this question, etc. So it can actually be a good aid more for the rep to stick to a script than maybe as much for, I would say that it's a good crutch if nothing else.
Great. All right. I wish video call platforms made it easier to use both, like Demio does. Yeah, so true. I think use tools like Zoom, and it make you really, really small and tiny. The user on their end can adjust the screen for you, but it's kind of difficult at times to get the screen ratio to look good. So.
Yeah,
all right.
I think somebody asked for how they can connect with me. I'll just post my LinkedIn link right here. And you can hit me up on LinkedIn.
All right. So a couple things before we wrap up. Let's go ahead and give Shruti a round of applause. You can go ahead and give the air round of applause in the comment area there. You can use the emoji. Sweet. She produced a lot of great information. As I mentioned, I'm a big fan of Wingman either way. So I'm going to just put something up on the screen. They gave me this deal to share with you all, and it should pop up, but you could go ahead and check it out. Just go ahead and click on a link. Wingman, typically you guys give like this, a shorter trial period, but for there's a Black Friday deal right now where you get 50% off Wingman for 6 months, right? Shruti, 50% off for 6 months.
Absolutely.
How can you do that?
We want to make sure that people are not spending all that time in trying to find people on Upwork or Fiverr to get the data going for their sales playbook for 2021. So, yeah, we want to make sure you can still make the best decisions for the next year.
Yeah, so I highly recommend you all check it out. It is a fascinating tool. And any one of you with a part of any team, no matter how big your team is, if it's one salesperson or it's 100 sales individuals, Wingman could be that guide to help your organization to perform. So this is a Black Friday special, and I think it ends December 1st, right, Shruti? Yeah,
2nd December.
Yeah. So, and if you want to get the promo, so you go to click on that link, go to trywingman.com. Yeah, Craig said it's a lot more affordable than he assumed. I'm telling you, it is like a steal. So, but when you go to it, use promo code TSE. Again, use the promo code TSE. So click on the link and then use promo code TSE, and they'll give you a ridiculous deal. And just because you're here. So even if you're not the decision maker in your organization, and you want to go ahead, sorry, I lied. It's December 2nd, not December 1st. But if you're not the decision maker in your organization, but you guys are doing your kickoff, if your team could benefit from just being able to track your data and stuff like this, I highly recommend you take this information back, give them the link, and tell them to go ahead and try Wingman. What's the worst that can happen? You try for 6 months at a ridiculous deal, and if it doesn't work in your favor, then so be it. But if it does, you're going to have great results. I know it works, and you saw some of the data today, so you're going to see that it definitely does work. So anywho, all right. So the last thing I want to give you, I want to give out, we're 2 gift cards. So we have a system here. I'm just go ahead and push that real quick. Some of you, I checked social media in between. I saw that some of you shared our stuff, and we put you in the hat twice. So I'm going to do the random order selection process. So one of our winner for a $25 gift card is Sabrina. Look at that. Sabrina, so you get a gift card. I'll make sure we'll send that information out to you. Sabrina, congratulations. $25 Amazon gift card. And we'll send the email, so you get an email version. And then let me go back and go into the system. The next one that we had here is, boom, Phil. Phil from Philly. Phil, so you got the next one that got selected. So Phil and Sabrina, you're going to get $25 gift cards. We'll make sure those get sent out to you. And we have your email address. It will become electronically, and you'll be able to get that. So I highly recommend you go back and connect with Wingman. If you're watching this recording, go ahead and take advantage of the deal. We'll post that all there and give you the link as well so you can get advantage of it. But thank you again, Shruti, for coming on the show today, coming on this webinar today, and for bringing all the wisdom. We really appreciate you and appreciate your insights. And thank you all for joining in. For all of you who were here and shared the information for this webinar, we'll do another webinar next month. And we're going to focus with a customer. We're going to focus from the procurement side. We're going to find out from procurement people what they are doing, what they like that salespeople are doing in these days to help them to succeed, or help that can help sellers succeed. So you don't do some of the silly things. So we're going on the other side of the line rather than a sales expert like what most of our guests on our podcast. We're going to bring somebody who's actually buying from you and find out what they recommend sellers to do. So as always, appreciate you all being here. As always, we want you to succeed. We want you to find ideal customers. We want you to know what to say when you reach out to them. We want you doing the best practice and your sales kickoff being great. But most importantly, we want you to go out each and every single day and do big things. Thank you so much for being here. Have a good one, gang. And happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And that's a wrap. Thanks, Shruti.
Yeah, thanks, Donald. I think Bharat will keep a look on the stats and he'll share with you what we see. But yeah, I think that was good.
Awesome. We appreciate it. Thank you so much. And we'll get this sent out to everyone who didn't make it today.
Okay, perfect.
Awesome.
Bye-bye. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.